Hey guys, welcome to D3 Media Video Essays. With Birds of Prey coming out, I wanted to do a video discussing a more positive take on DC's biggest blunder so far, Justice League. This was supposed to be a big moment for DC where we finally see the League up on the big screen for the first time. But unfortunately, it was a huge letdown due to misguided direction, studio interference, and wanting to compete with the MCU instead of taking time to build and flesh out this new cinematic universe. It left a lot of DC fans like myself disappointed. It was clear that this was the last straw for DC and Warner Brothers, as they seem to have gone back to the drawing board. And that's what I wanted to discuss today: how the failure of Justice League is a good thing for DC. Part 1. Why did Justice League fail? First, I wanted to look at why Justice League ultimately fell flat and how we got such a mediocre movie. While most of us want to place the blame on Joss Whedon and Warner Brothers, we have to go back further than that, all the way back to 2013 with the release of Man of Steel. Man of Steel really polarized the fan base, with some fans either loving or hating it. It set the tone for the DC Extended Universe as a dark, violent, and almost joyless universe. This was DC's first problem, as it became obvious that director Zack Snyder wanted to make the DCEU as different from the MCU as possible. Which is fine. I think many of us wanted some variety with our superhero movies, and we're a little tired of the more lighthearted Marvel formula. But instead of taking a more serious approach like the Nolan Batman trilogy, Snyder opted for an even more dark tone, which often came off as kind of pretentious. Despite this, people were very excited for the release of the Batman v Superman movie because we've been waiting for that movie for a very long time. A Batman and Superman movie seemed like an easy hit for DC, and would put them up there with whatever Marvel was doing because it was something we have been waiting for longer than any other superhero movie. Unfortunately, Batman v Superman was where the biggest flaws of the DC Extended Universe were shown. They clearly wanted to not be Marvel by continuing with a dark, gritty, and joyless tone, but at the same time wanted to be just like Marvel and catch up with them so that they could get to Justice League. What I mean by being just like Marvel, though, is they incorporated all of the things that aren't good about the MCU movies. Too many cameos, and being more concerned about setting up a future movie rather than focusing on getting the current movie right. It was obvious that they were more concerned with catching up because they introduced the goddamn Batman as pretty much a side character in a crossover movie instead of its own solo movie. Even more insulting was Wonder Woman being introduced as a cameo towards the end. This also was a good time to bring up how Henry Cavill's performance as Superman changed from Man of Steel to BVS. One thing that everyone universally liked about Man of Steel was Henry Cavill's performance as Superman. But in BVS, Superman is changed into a hypocrite jerk with a constant scowl on his face, who feels like he is more obligated to be Superman rather than it being something that he wants to do. After a historic drop-off at the box office, Warner Brothers stepped in and realized that this direction that Zack Snyder and the writing team were taking the DCEU just wasn't resonating with audiences. The next film in the lineup was Suicide Squad, which, judging by the first trailer, was supposed to be another dark and gritty movie like BVS and Man of Steel. So it went under heavy reshoots and then was remarketed as a bright, colorful Guardians of the Galaxy type movie, and it didn't work. Wonder Woman came out after that and was the odd one out because it actually did something different. It felt like a DC movie and didn't try to do anything else but celebrate the Amazonian badass that is Wonder Woman. By the time we got to Justice League, it was obvious that behind the scenes it was a mess. Zack Snyder's vision just wasn't working. They brought on Jeff Johns to take creative control of the DCEU, something they should have done from the very beginning, and Batman star Ben Affleck began getting more involved with teasing a solo Batman movie that he was to write and direct. It was obvious that everyone really wanted to make this work, but the damage was done. Zack filmed his version of Justice League, but very little of it ended up being used, and he was booted off. At first it was said that it was due to his daughter committing suicide, which was 100% understandable, but conflicting reports surfaced later on that say that Zack was fired. Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon to do reshoots and pretty much make Zack Snyder's Justice League movie into The Avengers, in a very short amount of time, mind you. And the result? Part 2. Batman doesn't quip. So we finally made it to Justice League, and what a disappointment. It was a mess. The plot was a mess, the CGI awful, and it was a giant apology letter for the past DCEU movies. When a movie is more concerned with apologizing to the fans rather than being a good movie, it rarely ever turns out good. Rise of Skywalker! A perfect example of this is Henry Cavill in this movie. It was obvious that behind the scenes somebody finally woke up and realized that making Superman into a moody clone of Batman wasn't such a good idea, and we finally get to see Cavill play, well, Superman. But we don't get to see him for most of the movie because, for one, they made the stupid decision to kill him off in BVS, and then cut half of his scenes during the reshoots. They also wanted to make this movie funnier. So now, everybody makes jokes and quips. Because hey, Marvel is doing it, so we should do the exact same thing. So now Batman is making Tony Stark style quips. Which is something Batman would never do! Part 3. The Aftermath. So yeah, Justice League ended up being a culmination of everything wrong with the DCEU. A huge heap of disappointment that really didn't know what it wanted to be. It was clear that DC and Warner Brothers needed to go back to the drawing board and pretty much start over, because what they were doing just wasn't working. DC decided to start focusing on telling individual stories and characters instead of worrying about the big crossover, and so far it's been working, as Aquaman and Shazam have been big hits. It showed that you don't have to make a character something they're not to get people to like them, but instead celebrate what makes these characters great. And comic book movies can still be dark and serious. Joker, a heavy, disturbing, and gritty movie that takes a look at how society ignores mentally ill people and their struggles until their struggles start to affect our lives, was great. I think the biggest thing to point out with the recent slew of DC movies is that these movies feel like DC movies. They don't feel like DC trying to be Marvel. If Justice League didn't fail, then we would have kept getting the same mediocre films that we were getting one after another. We wouldn't have Aquaman, Shazam, or Joker. If Justice League, a movie I had only dreamed of seeing on the big screen since I was a little kid, had to fail in order for us to get such great movies like The Joker, then you know what? I'm okay with that. Part 4. My opinion on the Snyder Cut. Before I wrap things up, I'd like to give my opinion on the Snyder Cut real quick. I wasn't a big fan of how Zack Snyder was treating these characters, especially Superman, since he's like my favorite superhero ever. It felt like the only character he really cared about was Batman, as Batman was the best part of Batman v Superman. Snyder felt like he had to fix Superman or deconstruct him in order to get people to like him. If anything, Snyder would have been better off directing one of the new DC Black movies like The Joker if he wanted to do something like that. So when people ask if I would like to see the Snyder Cut of Justice League, I always ask them why. From the confirmed plot leaks, it sounds like it would have been a mess. I'm sorry, I don't want to see a movie where Darkseid shows up in the first movie, kills Lois Lane, Superman already becomes evil, Martian Manhunter and Hal Jordan are awkwardly shoehorned in, and not care about these characters because everyone rushed instead of taking time to develop them. We already have one bad version of Justice League, we don't need two. And another thing, if Harry Lennox's character was supposed to be the Martian Manhunter the whole time, then why the shit didn't he do anything about the General Zod invasion during Man of Steel, or the Doomsday fight in Batman v Superman? Ugh. Part 5. The future of the DC movies and my final thoughts. The future of DC movies is definitely bright, with movies like Birds of Prey, Wonder Woman 1984, and The Batman coming out. It really gets me excited as a DC fan. I really like the DC Black thing they're trying to launch with the new Joker movie, as it gives filmmakers an opportunity to have more creative freedom and tell a more adult story. There was a rumored Lex Luthor movie to be in development, which would be awesome. You blew your opportunity to cast Bryan Cranston as Lex Luthor once, DC. Don't blow it again. My only concern is that movies like Birds of Prey are going to be a step backwards for DC, and that they're going to try to go back to their old formula, and from what I've seen of Birds of Prey so far at the time of writing this, it has me worried. I hope DC doesn't abandon the DCEU and we eventually get a soft reboot of the Justice League movie. It's a shame that Ben Affleck is no longer Batman, but I'm excited to see what Robert Pattinson is going to be doing with the role. James Gunn has teased that the Batman is in the same universe as his new Suicide Squad movie, which is great news if it's true. DC doesn't know what to do with Superman still because apparently he's a really hard character to understand. Seriously guys, just watch a few episodes of Superman the Animated Series, read What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way and All-Star Superman, and you'll be golden. Hell, if Marvel can turn Captain America into the best character in the MCU, then there's no reason you guys can't do the same thing with Superman. But I digress. It's good to see that even though Justice League was a financial success, that DC and Warner Brothers listen to their fans. I hope they keep making good DC movies and ignore what Marvel is doing and continue to flesh out this universe, because I want to see more of it. Hopefully we can just forget about the bad things that happened and move on. Or they'll go back to what they were doing and the Snyder Cut will be released and DC fans and Snyder fanboys will continue to yell at each other over the internet. Who knows? So that's it for me. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about the new DC films, the Snyder Cut, and the DC Extended Universe as a whole. As always, if you like what you see, go ahead and like and subscribe. It would be greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media and the links are in the description below. And remember, I waste my money so you don't have to. Thanks for watching.